TV. Today we are starting season 4 of Alexandra TV, and I have a very, very special guest for all of you. Neale Donald Walsch is a modern-day spiritual messenger who has published 33 titles in the past 20 years, including the Conversations with God books, which have been translated into 37 languages and read by millions. Walsch's newest book, Awaken the Species, A New Conversation with God, has been published in 2017 and describes a new way of being human, which the author suggests could improve individual lives instantaneously and change the world in less than a generation. Such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you.
It's lovely to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you to you. Thank you for accepting the invitation.
Well, of course, I'd be very happy to. How may I serve this moment?
Well, I am sure that this moment that we're going to spend together is going to serve many, many people out there. And just to put everyone in the context, perhaps people who have never heard about your work or about Conversations with God, let's just start at the beginning of how everything started. From what I read, it was spring 1992. You were at a time in your life where professionally, emotionally, personally,
physically.
And physically too, okay, you weren't happy at all. And then it happened. The first conversation that God had with you, or as you so eloquently say, that God had with us through you, right? Can you share with us how that happened, that moment, that night?
Yes, well, just for a tiny bit of backstory, so that people really understand the desperation. You mentioned a few things, but you went through it rather quickly.
Yeah.
My relationship with my significant other had fallen apart. My career had reached a total dead end. Then I had an automobile accident in which I broke my neck. Now, most people who sustain a broken neck either die or they are paralyzed. But I didn't have either one of those outcomes. But I was in rehabilitation for almost 18 months. So I couldn't work.
Yeah.
So I was desperate because nothing in my life was working. You know, normally in somebody's life, maybe the relationship isn't going so well, but the career is doing okay. Or the career isn't going so well, but the relationship is doing okay. Or the relationship and the career are doing well, but maybe you have a health problem. I had all three.
All of them.
All three at one time. Yeah. So I literally, fell to my knees at one point, and I said, okay, God, what do you want from me? What don't I understand here about how life works? What have I done wrong? Because if you can't give me some answers, I'm through, I'm out. This was on a particular night of my life in February of that year. And I was desperate. And then I heard a voice over my right shoulder. Neale, do you really want answers to all of these questions? Or are you just venting?
Like we often do, right, as humans?
Yeah. And so I turned around, there was no one there, and I thought, oh, terrific. Not only have I lost everything, but now I'm losing my mind as well. But I was suddenly overcome with a peace, inner peace, calm, serenity. And there happened to be a yellow legal pad on the coffee table in front of me, and where I picked up and I'd written a very angry letter to God. And I began receiving answers to the questions that I was asking. Yeah. So I took them down. I was never intending to write a book. I was never intending for anyone to ever see this. It was really a personal, private process of journaling.
Right.
Just journaling, just to get it out,
And you say that you would always do that, right? To journal, that you would be someone who would write.
I was a writer by trade. I didn't keep a journal, actually, but that night I thought, I'm just going to write out my anger, and get rid of my... Well, I began writing down the answers to the questions that I was asking. And as those answers came to me, more questions came to me, because I thought, well, I don't know, how does that work? I don't understand. So I would ask more questions, and I kept track of everything. I was writing everything down, because what I was hearing was so unusual and so extraordinary. Thoughts that I'd never heard ever before from any place. Not in my teaching when I was a young boy, not in my culture, not in my home, not in my religion. I didn't hear these thoughts anywhere. So after a very short while, I became fascinated. What is happening? So I kept on asking questions and getting answers, asking questions and getting answers. And before I knew it, I had many pages of this yellow legal pad filled with handwritten questions and answers. And that went on for around 2 or 3 weeks. Every night I would get up or be awakened, really.
At 4:23?
Yeah, at 4:23 in the morning.
When you were born, and you found that many years after,
Many,
which is fascinating.
Yeah, I didn't really realize what was so significant about 4:23.
Yes.
But it turned out I learned that was when I was born. My birth certificate said 4:23 a.m. So I continued this conversation that I was having, and I began to think of it as a conversation with God, because I didn't know what else to call it. And the answers that I was getting to my questions were so profound that I realized that something extraordinary was occurring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what happened, and I had never really ever dreamt of writing a book, or that anyone, as I said a minute ago, that anyone would ever see this. But at some point in the first third of that dialogue, I was told this will one day become a book. And I thought, yeah, of course, you and 100 other people are going to send your middle of the night mental meanderings to a publisher who's going to say, we have to get this out at once.
Yeah.
This man's talking to God.
Yeah.
I knew, of course, there wasn't a chance in the world that that was going to happen. So I sent my handwritten notes to a stenographer who typed them out for me. And I sent that typewritten manuscript to a publisher, realizing that no one was ever going to publish. A book by a man who no one's ever heard of, who's claiming to have a conversation with God. There wasn't a chance in the world that was good. But I did it as a test. Yeah. I thought, we'll see about this. Because if what's happening to me is real, then even the improbable possibility of a book being published would happen. So I was really, honestly, testing God.
And is that something that God said to you, that it was going to get published?
This will one day become a book, was the exact word. This will one day become a book. So I was astonished when one of the publishers, I sent it to 5 publishers, not 25 or 30, just 5. But one of those 5 publishers called me and said, we want to publish this. And I said, you're kidding me. Really? He said, yes, we want it. Not only did they publish it, they put it on the fast track. That is, they put it out within 90 days, which is very fast for a book.
Yeah, it is fast for a book.
So they designed it, edited it. They did no editing really, but they designed it. And they put it out, and 2 months later, it was on the New York Times bestseller list.
It became a phenomenon.
Where it stayed on that bestseller list for many, many weeks, almost 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And it wound up being translated into 37 languages. And it wound up being read by a million people. Yeah. More than a million people.
Which I think was supposed to happen, because
of
it
course.
was the perfect time for that.
Of course.
And you were being used as a vessel through which that message, all those messages that God was giving.
Well, I think we're all being used as a vessel. I want to make that real clear, because I never want anyone to think, oh, he's being used as a vessel. I don't want to become the Pope of the New Age.
Yeah.
So I want everyone to understand that it wasn't that I was being used as a vessel, the whole message of the conversation is that all of us are having conversations with God all the time.
That's true.
And that each of us, in fact, is united with and one with God, that there's really no separation between us.
Yeah.
And but the book was meant to give people permission to believe that that might be true.
Yeah.
And so it wound up, being published, and I continued to have the experience. So I continued to send my notes to the publisher, and then one thing led to another, and since that time I've written 33 books.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing books, by the way. Preparing to this, of course, I've already read Conversations with God, The Three Tones, but preparing to this, I went through all of your books, including this one, which is the latest one, right? I believe it was published this year, but you had this fourth conversation. It was in August of last year, of 2016, that it happened. Now, before we get into this, in the first book, God says, because you ask him, I believe it was, why is it me? Why isn't any other person being talked to? And he says that he talks to all of us constantly through feelings, through experiences, through thoughts, and at last, if we don't listen, through words. Now, why do you think that we often don't listen, that so many people don't listen to God when he talks to us?
Well, I think we do, actually, but I think we don't think that it's God. I think we listen, but I think we imagine it's just our own thoughts, or maybe our ego, or maybe our imagination. And so I think we listen, we hear some of those ideas, and once in a while we actually do listen carefully. That is, sometimes we act on what we call our intuition.
Yeah.
We call it women's intuition, or a stroke of genius, or a sudden insight, or so we have all kinds of words that we use when we really do listen. But we don't want to actually call it a conversation with God, because our culture has told us that people don't talk directly to God. And even if they do in prayer or whatever, God certainly doesn't talk back. Lily Tomlin, the wonderful comedian, said, when I told people that I talk to God every day, they say I'm devout. When I told people that God talks to me every day, they said that I was crazy. So it's an interesting way we hold it. So I think that people do actually hear what I want to call the voice of God, but I think they call it something else so they can get away with it.
Absolutely.
So that no one is going to marginalize them or think that there's something wrong with them. So, but that's because of the books, that has started to go away. More and more people are now more open to the experience, and they're calling it what it is. My personal connection with the divine. I'm very clear that divine wisdom resides within all of us.
Absolutely.
And all we have to do is listen to it. So, but the answer to your question, why don't we listen more carefully, is that it is totally unacceptable in our human society.
Don't believe that it's possible.
To believe that we are talking to God, much less tell somebody else about it.
Because like you said, most people think that God stopped speaking to us 2,000 years ago,
Yes,
right? Most people believe that, but that's absolutely not true. Now, in the books that you've written here, that God helped you write, if you can say it like that.
Let me make this, you made an interesting point.
Yes.
There's no argument among the human race that God talks directly to human beings. We assume that God talked to many people thousands of years ago. So no one doubts. I mean, the story of Moses, and he had a communication with God. No one doubts those things. No one doubts the story of Jesus or others, for that matter. But somehow, so I mean, all the world's great religions, most of the world's great religions, have been formed around some person
That's true.
who claims to have spoken directly to God, whether it's Muhammad, bless his holy name, or whether it's Jesus, or whoever it might be. Those religions were created around the teachings of someone who feels that he received a revelation directly from God. So there's no argument that that happens. But what people say is, yeah, but God stopped talking to us several thousand years ago. He's come down with a bad case of celestial laryngitis and doesn't speak to us anymore. So, and what God is saying was, no. I never stopped talking to you.
Right.
And I've been talking to you all along. And then somebody came along and dared to say that God is talking to me.
Yes.
And so that's my answer. That's my
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm very, very glad that I did it, because it has opened the doorway for thousands of people around the world
It's true.
to step into their own experience of the exact same thing.
Yeah. Now, you say in throughout the books that there were 3 invitations, right? So God says that there are 3 invitations. The first one was to change the world's mind about God.
Let me put that into a context.
Absolutely.
I believe that God has given all of us 3 invitations, specific opportunities to show up in life in a particular way. The first invitation that I received, not just for me, but for everyone, was, as you said, change the world's mind about God. That was God's greatest desire. You know, Neil and all the rest of you, if you could just change the world's mind about God, what a huge, huge difference that would make. Which is why I wrote a book, by the way, called God's Message to the World, You've Got Me All Wrong, which was a book that I wrote specifically in response to that invitation. So the second invitation was to give people back to themselves. That is, to allow people to come to clarity about who they really are and what is the essence of all sentient beings in the universe. Who are we really?
Which is?
Divinity, individuated. That each of us are an individuation of divinity itself. And when we give people back to themselves, we remind them of their true identity and of their true nature. And many people respond to that by acting as if that were true for them. That is, you give them back to themselves by reminding them of their real origin and of their true identity and their real nature. Then, in August of 2016, I received a third invitation on behalf of all of humanity. And that invitation was to awaken the species.
Which is perfect at the perfect
Wake
time.
people up so that they can arise out of their slumber and come to experience what it means to be human in the way it was intended to be experienced, as opposed to the illusion that we are living.
Yeah. You say we're living the illusion and there's a way that we should be living. Now tell us a little bit about the way that we should be living as awakened species.
Well, I never use the word should, not to get into trouble with you.
That's okay.
But I always say, don't should on yourself.
That's true.
So,
You're right.
so we should. I don't use the word should, but we are invited, and to live in a certain way. And in the book Conversations with God, Book 4, I was given a list of 16 specific behaviors that are demonstrated by entities, beings who are awakened, who are fully awakened. And the first, I think, and most important of those behaviors was actually revealed to me in the very first Conversations with God book. But it's also at the top of this list of 16 behaviors. And that is that you end the illusion of separation, to stop thinking of ourselves as separate from each other, as separate even from ourselves in a peculiar kind of way. We sometimes think of ourselves as being separate even from our most holy self, and of course as separate from God.
Yeah.
So what God made clear to me in the dialogue was there's no separation of anything from anything in the universe. There's only one thing. All things are one thing. There is only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is. If we applied that notion to our politics, to our economics, to our social systems, and of course to our religions, everything on earth would change overnight.
Absolutely.
The challenges that are being faced by humanity and that have been faced by humanity for these thousands of years are created out of a simple idea that we're separate from each other. I'm over here and you're over there. I have to serve my interests first. I'll try to serve your interests if I love you, and I would love you if you serve my interests. So we have a trade going on. It's kind of a trade deal. Like nations have trade deals with each other. People do that too.
That's true.
You know, I love you if you love me, and I'll give you everything that I have to give you if you'll give me everything you have to give me. So we have a trade arrangement. And on Valentine's Day, we look for the perfect card. My darling Alexander, I trade you very much. And I will never stop trading you. I will trade you until the end of time. But if you stop trading me, the deal's off. See, it's over. So, excuse me, so I have come to be clear that the largest problem in human experience is our idea of separation. There are other behaviors as well of beings that are fully awakened. The second or third thing on that list is that highly evolved beings that are awakened, fully awakened, always tell the truth.
Always.
They never lie about anything. And they don't lie to anybody else, and they don't lie to themselves. Another behavior that we are invited to embrace is that fully awakened beings say one thing and they do what they say. Many human beings say one thing and do another. So they're not consistent. They lack integrity when it serves them to change their mind or to do something other than what they said they were going to do.
Exactly.
And I think one of the most intriguing behaviors of an awakened species, number 4 on that list of 16, is that an awakened species, members of such a group, they see what is so, and they do what works. Human beings in large numbers see what is so, and they do what does not work. To give you a striking example, human beings have come to the conclusion that what's so is that this makes people sick. It actually kills people. And that's what's so. And we see that that's what's so. But we do what doesn't work anyway. Step outside and have a cigarette on a break. And because we don't care. We see that what's so is if we eat tons of red meat, morning, noon, and night. You know, that it's not good for our health. We do what doesn't work anyway. But it wouldn't be even so bad if it just involved us. But we actually see, for instance, I'll give you another example of what's so. What's so is that if you put a child from the age of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 in front of images, television, video games, even comic books where violence runs rampant through the entire story, that's what creates the excitement. It's all the violence. It's not surprising that when that child grows into a young man, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, he becomes a violent, he acts, he tries, seeks to solve his problems using violence. Now, not everyone does, but the increase in the number of young people using violence these days, now we open up the internet and we see a story of a 7-year-old boy who's thrown his 3-year-old brother out the window, you know, of an apartment building. because that's what you
Now
do.
he saw him.
That's what you do. So, and we wonder when those things happen. We say, where did they ever get such an idea? Why would they ever do such a thing? Hello, you put them in front of images of violence for the time they're 4 years old. Of course, they're going to think that that's the way we behave. So those are just a few striking examples of how we see what is so, and we do exactly the opposite. We look right into the face of the evidence, and we simply don't care.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the behaviors of
the 16 behaviors of
Yeah.
highly evolved beings. Now, to get into that, because I know that some people who are watching who perhaps didn't read the book, they're probably watching and saying, what are highly evolved beings? What is this concept? Maybe it's new to them. I know that for me, when I was reading, even if in conversation, in the third book, you start that conversation about highly evolved beings, but now in this book, we actually learn that they are helping us in awakening. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I find that very fascinating.
Well, I was told that there are entities in the universe. Let me back up a step.
Sure.
Surely it has become obvious to us now, talking about what's so. Clearly, what's so is that we are not the only sentient beings in the universe.
Absolutely.
You know, 150 or 200 years ago, we may have insisted that we are the only forms of life in the cosmos, but now it's pretty clear. Numerically, the odds of us being the only sentient beings in the cosmos, you know, are impossibly high. Of course, there are other sentient beings. By the way, cosmologists are now telling us that even our universe is 100 times larger than we thought it was. We have just been told 2 or 3 years ago by cosmologists that our universe turns out to be one of a universe of universes.
Wow.
Yeah, so by a factor of 100.
Incredible.
And so with that many billions and billions of stars and planets, surely intelligent life has arisen elsewhere and in other dimensions as well. And so what I was told in book 4 of Conversations with God is that there are, in fact, highly evolved beings. Human beings are, as a species, very young. We've been
like toddlers, right? That's
we are
We're
the toddlers
of the universe.
of the universe. That's exactly right. But there are entities living in other places and in other dimensions that are highly evolved, way past anything that, you know, like a college professor as opposed to a 4-year-old child, at that level of distance, and that they are assisting us and have been offering their assistance to humanity in a wide variety of ways, including giving us information, inserting in our thought stream ideas and philosophies and understandings, and even on rare occasion, very rarely, but it's happened, actually manifesting on the earth as human beings once every several thousand years, in order to model, in order to be a model of the behaviors of a fully awakened species.
Right.
So this book, book 4 in the Conversations with God series, invites people to consider what it would be like to step into those behaviors. And that list of 16 behaviors is a beginning list that has been given to humanity by highly evolved beings who have said to us, look, this is how we behave. We don't lie. We don't lie to ourselves. We don't lie to other people. We don't ignore what's true and do it anyway. You know, and all of those things. And we don't imagine that we're separate from anybody or anything else. And they list a whole raft of behaviors that would allow humanity, if we adopted even a few of them, to advance exponentially, very, very rapidly, and in our own evolution. And we had better. Because if we don't start making some rapid forward movement in our own evolutionary process, we're liable to do ourselves in here. Environmentally,
That's true.
socially, economically, and politically. We've gone about as far as we can go behaving like barbarians.
That's true.
And we are behaving like barbarians. We claim to be civilized. But
I love that part when you talk about that in the book, when you say how we claim to be civilized, but then you give all of the examples of how we are so not civilized. And it's true, you read and you're like, that's so true. We're not civilized at all. Can you give some of the examples that you
I'd be
share?
happy to. A civilized civilization would not allow 653 of its children to die of starvation every year. No, I mean every week. No, I mean every day. No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I keep getting the statistics wrong.
I'm like that too. I'm not good at numbers, but I think it's
No.
650 every day. I believe it was
every
650.
hour.
Oh, okay, yeah, every hour.
I was,
How incredible
of
is
course, I
that, huh?
knew the number. I was
Yeah.
simply saying that to lead people on,
Ah.
because people need to understand that in this civilization, we allow 653 children to die of starvation every single hour,
Crazy.
and we call ourselves civilized. 1.6 billion people do not even have access to clean water. See this? Clean water?
Yeah.
1.6 billion people do not have access to clean water.
Yeah. It's incredible.
1.8 billion people do not have electricity. Just to give a few numbers of how we operate on this planet and still call ourselves civilized. And we allow ourselves to imagine that, oh, Neil, relax. I understand that billions of people don't even have access to clean water, but that's the way it is. That's life. How can a species which calls itself evolved allow such suffering in ways that could be solved
Yeah.
overnight?
Absolutely.
But you see, it would require a different level of consciousness
Yeah.
and a different way that we expend our resources and our money. Do you realize that 8 human beings right now on this planet, 8 people, have more wealth and resources than 2/3 of the human race combined? So we see then that our whole economic, social, political, and spiritual structure is, frankly, barbarian.
Yeah. And definitely not working. And it can
And it's
continue.
not working. And we pretend that it's working. Well, we're doing, Neil, we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can. And now we're hoping that we don't create some kind of a nuclear holocaust,
Yeah.
with this
Everything's
manly game of 2 world leaders saying, my missile is bigger than yours.
Acting like toddlers, really, which proves the point of of us humans being toddlers. That's really what it is.
So, somebody needs to wake up and say, whoa, wait a minute. Is it possible there's something we don't fully understand here? The understanding of which would change everything.
Yeah.
And that's the question no one will ask. No world leader of any country will ask. No world spiritual figure will even ask the question. No world economic leader will ask the question. But I put the question before humanity. Is it possible that there's something we don't fully understand here, the understanding of which would change everything? The answer is obviously yes. Who will raise the question and who will offer the answer?
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and so very true. And that's why it's time to awaken the species, right?
See, they're coming to get me. You hear that siren? they're coming to get me because when I talk like this, they send the police very, very quickly.
But yeah, it's very, very true. There's one of the, actually, it was at the beginning of the book on page 5, one thing that I absolutely love and I wanted to share here. The fastest way to awaken more quickly is to be the cause of someone else's awakening more quickly. And I think that is so true. When I read that, I was like, that's so true. And as we're talking here about awakening the species, I'm sure a lot of people are asking, okay, yeah, I know the 16 ways of highly evolved beings. I have to do that, but how can I do it? And I think that that is very, very true. Do you feel in your life that that's what has helped you awaken more quickly? And would you call yourself an awakened being?
No.
No?
I don't think that anybody who knows me personally would say that I'm a fully awakened being. If you had asked me, Neil, do you think that you are awakening and that you're moving toward that, I would probably have to acknowledge, yes, I'm taking steps in that direction. But I'm not a fully awakened being, and no one who knows me would even imagine that I am. But I have undertaken a deep and true effort to let go of certain behaviors, like lying, just to give you a simple example. I don't lie anymore. You could ask me any question you want to ask me, and I would tell you the absolute truth. Just as an example. So I've begun to embrace some of those behaviors of a fully awakened species, and I hope that my dream would be that before I leave this particular lifetime, that I could say that I got closer. Closer
to that.
As I was going to completion.
As I was going through these 16 ways, I was like, well, I'm not there yet for sure. From being there yet.
And I'm not either.
I got a long way to
but
go.
At least, you know what? At least now I have a map.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I have a road map. Now I know where I'm going. For years, I didn't know where I was going. And that reminds me of the guy who pulled up, at my hometown. He was a tourist, and he rolled down the window of his car, and he said, "Sir, could you give me directions?" I said, "Sure, I'm glad to. Where are you going?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, when you know where you're going, let me, I'll tell you how you go." So now I felt like I was a tourist who didn't know where he was going on this earth until I had my conversations with God. Now at least I have a map.
Right.
At least I have a sense of direction. And, but I'm an older person now. It happened to me. All this happened when I was 50 years old. I wasn't a young man. I wasn't like 23 or 34 or 41. I was 52 years old. So I have a saying that I use in my life. So old, so soon. So smart, so late.
That's a pretty good one. That's funny.
But better late than never.
Absolutely.
So the answer to your question is, no, I'm not an awakened person, but I am moving toward being fully awakened. Now, what God said to me in this book, in this dialogue was, she said, actually, Neil, you are awakened, and everybody is. You're all already awakened. You just don't know it.
I love the example you gave about the dream, right?
Yeah, well, because I asked her, I said, wait a minute, how can I be awakened and not know it? And he said, have you ever found yourself in the middle of the night and you hear a bump, in the middle of the night, and you go, and you think it's part of your dream. You just dreamed that, and then you realize, wait a minute, that wasn't a dream. That was in the house. The cat must have knocked over a vase downstairs. Something happened. That actually happened in real life. And so God is saying to me, you are already awake. You simply don't know it. And the way that you can come to a place of knowing it and then embracing it and then living into it more and more is to help others to know that they too are fully awake. That they too are awake and simply don't know it. That's what I meant, she said, when I invited you, give people back to themselves. Remind them who they really are. So I've tried to do what he's asked me to do.
I think you're doing it very well. Very, very well.
I'm trying.
Yes. So another aha moment that I have here, and I've had so many throughout the book, to be honest with you, all these little blue things are aha moments where I was like, I have to choose at least like two. And it was on page 48, and it says here, but now, if you're saying that from this day forward, your intention in everything you think, say, and do is to awaken your species and all of the parts of self-expression that moves you forward on your own evolutionary journey, then you're going to see a different level of outcome. And how beautiful was that? Because I've often said that the intention is what matters, right? And everything that you do, it's all about intention. But then I thought, what if my intention at every moment was to say, my intention behind this is to awaken the species. So before we started here today, I set my intention and I said, this moment that we're going to spend together is going to be in order to awaken the species, to help, right, in that process there.
At one level, that might sound a bit arrogant, a little bit spiritually arrogant. Who are you to say that you're going to awaken the species? That's what stops people from stepping into their highest self. But people who really understand who they are would embrace such a notion with great humility. I don't see myself as any different from you. We're both moving toward being fully awakened. But there might be something that's a bit unusual between us. It might be that I am aware of exactly what I'm doing, and you may not be fully aware yet. So if I could, by something I might say or do, or even just by living the way I'm living, by just being who I am, just by example, perhaps. Perhaps I might, by the sheer energy of my example, cause you to suddenly be aware. And I say that to myself. I would never say it out loud. I'm saying it out loud now on camera, But I don't go through the world saying that out loud. But in my mind, when I meet someone, when I encounter a brand new person in my life, in my mind I say quietly to myself, I have come that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. And I see if there's some way I can step into the full living of that. And I encounter my own imperfections. So I wouldn't even begin to suggest that I act that way all the time. But you know what? By laying that pathway ahead of me, once in a while I actually do. Every so often I actually touch another person in that way, and they will say to me, my life has been enriched because you passed by, because you moved through. And that's when, in the quiet of my own heart, I say, yes, yes, that's what I'm really doing here. And all of us are. And if all of us were to decide to walk that path, the world's change virtually overnight.
Absolutely.
But I wrote a book called The Only Thing That Matters, and the first paragraph that book says, paragraph 1, page 1, chapter 1, 98% of the world's people are spending 98% of their time on things that don't matter.
That's true.
On things that have nothing to do with why we're here. We get caught up in our doingness. Oh, you don't understand, I'm a cameraman. That's what I do. I'm an audio technician. That's what I do. No, you don't understand. I do interviews. I write books. That's what I do. But those doingness functions are meaningless unless they are ways to demonstrate what we're really here to accomplish. And what we're really here to accomplish is the fullest expression of who we really are. People who step into that activity and come from that awareness are people who change the lives of everyone whose life they touch.
Yeah, very true. And I'm seeing that there's more and more people who want to live like that, if I can say like that. There's this really awakening that is happening in the world today.
I agree with you.
And I love to see that. I don't know, I often say, I don't know if it's going to happen in this generation. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see the full awakening of humanity, but I'm glad to be part of the process. I'm glad that we're all part of this process, right? It's an amazing thing. In the one of the last parts of the book, you say how there are 5 steps, right? Well, God says to you for us, right? For everyone, He says that there are 5 different steps that we can take in order to help us, awaken a little more. Can you share a little bit about those steps?
You have to tell me because I have no idea.
Let me go here. I know it's in
See,
the third.
you know what's interesting about this?
Yes.
People think that I have memorized my entire
Of course,
book.
yeah. I completely understand that.
But really, honestly,
Yeah.
I probably would know those steps
Yeah.
if I actually wrote it.
Oh, yeah, that's
Because
true.
you don't forget things you write.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't write it. I was taking dictation.
That's true.
It's like somebody stepped into the room and gave me this information,
Yeah.
and so I don't have it memorized.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's pretty good stuff. It reminds me of what it said.
Amazing. It's actually amazing. I'm going to go through them quickly, and then you can elaborate in each.
Okay.
There's the first one that is share your process.
Yes, which is exactly what I've been doing here on the program, and so have you. As we share openly the process of our own struggle to awaken, we encourage and give courage to other people who say, now I can do that.
Yeah.
I can do that too. So by being naked in front of the world, so to speak, and sharing and being totally truthful and totally honest and sharing everything that's going on with us, I think we encourage other people.
Absolutely. People can see themselves, and again, it kind of destroys in a way separation.
Yes, it ends separation.
It ends, yeah, better word. It ends. The second one is create a reason. Create a reason.
Yes, create a reason for doing what you're doing and being who you are being, saying what you're saying, and thinking what you're thinking. And I also demonstrated that here. My reason is, I have come that you may have life, and that you may have it more abundantly. That's my raison d'etre.
Oh, yeah, raison d'être.
And,
Well said.
and I didn't pronounce that properly,
Oh,
but
you did.
I have a saying, the French don't really care what they do actually, as long as they pronounce it properly.
Yeah. That's funny. The next one is express gratitude. Express gratitude.
I believe that gratitude is the single most powerful tool in the process of spiritual awakening.
Absolutely.
If we can decide that we are grateful to life, to God, and to ourselves for everything that has happened, what we call good and what we call not so good, that energy changes the expression, it changes the vibratory frequency of how we move through the world, and it actually transforms the exterior experiences of our life.
Absolutely.
So I find that gratitude is a very, very powerful tool. So I say, thank you, God. Even when I'm facing a major problem, thank you, God, for helping me to understand that this problem has already been solved for
I
me.
want to say that all the time, yeah. Absolutely. Very, very good. Then the next one is choose a state of being. Choose a state of being.
I think this is a powerful key. It helps us to move from our mind to our soul. So what I encourage myself to do is to actively select a state of being. I choose to be gentle. I choose to be understanding. I choose to be compassionate, or whatever it might be. I choose to be wise. I choose to be clear. I choose to be loving. And to choose a state of being not as a reaction to what's going on, but as a decision about how you're going to be before anything is going on, which is what causes things to go on.
Yeah.
So then you become causal in the matter of your life, and your life is no longer a reaction, it's a creation.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Amazing. And then the last one is go with the soul. Go with the soul.
Yeah, every time I get in trouble in my life is when I imagine that my mind has the answer to something. God said to me very clearly in conversations with God, life will never make sense to your mind. Because for a very good reason, your mind has limited data. It only has the data it has collected since it was turned on, since the mind became active in utero. So, but that's, in my case, 74 years. But the soul has the data of all eternity, both backward and forward. the entire panorama of all that is, of the only moment of now. So if I try to go with the soul and I ask myself a very important question before I make any choice or decision, what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? I think about that when I put on certain clothes, when I eat certain food in a restaurant, when I meet a person, when I agree to do an interview, or when I agree to do anything. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? If I can't see a connection, I don't do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for seeing the connection here.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
It's a pleasure. And I also wanted to ask you, I've heard you once say in an interview that God is everything and there is nothing that is not God. Do you still believe that?
Yes, of course. I don't believe it, I know it.
You know it.
There's a difference between belief and knowing.
That's true. That's true. Can you explain to everyone that God is everything and there is nothing that is not God? Perhaps people who are watching and who don't really understand that.
Everything is energy. Everyone understands that life is simply an expression of energy. Everything is energy simply vibrating, at different frequencies.
Yeah.
If we change the word energy for the word God, divinity, we suddenly see that, of course, everything is energy. Everything in the universe is energy vibrating in a certain way. And I call that energy God. So it's all that is, all that ever was, all that ever will be. And it moves through you, in you, as you. And when we are conscious of that, when we're aware of it, we find ways to actually utilize that energy. God's greatest statement to humanity is, use me. Use me.
And finally, I wanted to ask you, what happens after we all awaken? After awakening the species, what do you think will happen?
I think we'll have heaven on earth. I think we'll experience paradise as it was intended to be. I think we will experience no more violence. You know, they wrote it in the song. No more violence, no more war.
Yeah.
No more anger, no more hunger, no more negativity of any kind.
Right.
I think that we will create a species that allows itself to express the highest thought it ever had about life, moving through each and every one of us. And I think it will be an extraordinary expression of divinity itself. So I think it'll be like everyone's wedding night.
Wow, that's beautifully said. Everyone's wedding night. Incredible. Thank you so much for this time that we spent together. It was absolutely amazing for me, but I know that it was amazing for everyone who is watching.
You're
It
very
was
kind.
incredible.
You're very kind to say those things. Thank you for inviting me to share this time with you.
Thank you. Thank you for serving the way that you do. It's amazing.
And you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
serving the way that you do. Blessed
Thank
be.
you. Thank you so much. So to everyone, thank you all for watching. It was, as you saw, an incredible conversation that we had here. If you liked this conversation, please don't forget to like it, of course. Don't forget to share it with all of your friends so that more people can get to know, can get to understand really God, right? Which is the first invitation that we have from God. And also in the comment section down below, please let me know, what is your definition of God? What do you think God is? How do you see God? I would love to hear from you. We'll see you next week.